living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
Welcome to SPEDTalk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
Before the Storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources. Welcome to SPEDTalk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
Before the Storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
Well, we are excited to have Texas Can spotlighted, really showcasing some of the awesome work that's going on with the Texas Can Network. I've been on the website recently, and I love that promotional video you have up front that really kind of sets the tone, I think, of the Texas Can Network and how it's saying, listen, we know more about the human brain and about human intelligence and about possibilities, and so we want to make sure we are connecting educators to evidence-based practices and resources and curriculums and things that are out there. And so I just love that little, it's just a snippet almost. It's like a minute and a half or something, but that's a great video. So thank y'all for joining us. I don't mean to take over right off. I just am excited about this network and having y'all on today.
I love that video too, and it was so much fun. I mean, we just had a brainstorming session where we sat down and started drawing things out. And I love the part where it says we're riding on the crest of a wave headed to the shores of equality, belonging, and independence. And you're right, things have changed so that we know a lot more than we ever did, and technology is just skyrocketing. So we now have better supports for students, and we understand more about the student themselves. So we're built around the premise of presuming competence, and everything in research kind of supports that. And our big pushes towards belonging and inclusion, moving from different and less to equal and capable, from segregated and marginalized to included and valued. And that sums up our whole vision and everything that we do. I'm excited about all the things TA has helped us in putting together, and just such quality things, and it's amazing. And I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to do what we do. It has been fun. I'm glad you got to see the website.
Would you mind both introducing yourselves and kind of giving us a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are working with TexCan? And so you've given us some great insight into TexCan itself. So tell us a little bit about you, Mr. Wong, and you, Ms. Hopkins.
Patrick, you want to start?
Sure. I'm new to Texas. I'm a new Texan. I moved here about 1.5 years ago from the great state of Ohio to be near family. I have a daughter in Dallas and her husband, and I have a son living in Austin. So we are privileged to be here. I've been in special education for about 40 years, been a kind of older fellow. I started teaching, of course, about 10 years in the classroom with students with complex needs. Did some other work and transition, and then in Ohio we have a state support team, which we work through our Ohio Department of Education through providing training and through IEP training, transition, other areas that Ohio had their priority. And I'm privileged to work with Lottie and Shannon and her team at ESE3. They have done some great work, so I'm just glad to be here and just helping them and assisting them and providing all the creative work that they've developed.
Well, likewise, Patrick. For me, this path, I mean, I feel like I have been on it since childhood because I'm pretty old. So I have a cousin who now we would say that he's on the autism spectrum, but back then, we didn't know autism. We just knew that he had a pretty severe disability. And he was nonverbal. He never attended public school. It was very hard on my aunt, but I always I could see that he understood things and I always remember as a child with my cousin, I wanted to I just thought somehow I could break through and help him. And then when I started school, I met another first grader actually who had a disability, and it was the very beginning of school. So she was in with all the students, but then I guess they realized that she had a disability, and she was moved to a life skills classroom, and we remained friends, even though she was in another classroom. And I mean, we're still friends to this day. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know I wanted to be a special education teacher, but I've always loved school. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I had my family first, and I started subbing wherever they went to school. And I got a call one morning, and they asked me to sub in life skills. And I thought, oh, that must be homemaking. So I went to the class, and it wasn't homemaking. I never left that class. So the teacher wasn't coming back, and I got my certification in special education, and I stayed. And I had some great paras that helped me that first year, like just kind of understand what my role was, and going to ARD meetings and all those different kinds of things. And one of the first things I noticed with my students, it was a junior high classroom, and looking at their evaluations, I would see things like that they were at a 24-month level or 36-month level. And it's like, man, that really doesn't tell me a lot about my students, because they could do so much, and I could tell that they understood so much, and their sense of humor, it's like they're catching on to this, they understand this. And so from there, I came to the service center, and originally I came as the autism specialist. My master's is from UNT, specializing in autism. At that time, we had the LID grant here, the Low Incidence Disability Grant. I worked with Mary Scott. And again, man, I couldn't have had a better mentor. That's kind of everything is built from there. And I just feel very, very privileged to be able to do what I do now. And I work with some amazing, wonderful, bright people. And we've seen over the years some great things happen for kids when you really kind of do that mind shift and change your vision and believe in the possibilities. I haven't been disappointed yet. So that's a little bit about me.
Just a little bit about that transition from, that low incidence disabilities network. That was an established network in Texas prior to the Texas Complex Access Network, Texas CAN or TX CAN. Will you talk a little bit about the transition from that the LID to the Texas CAN network?
Sure. That network, the LID network, was originally it was 3 LID, because we talked about, low incidence disabilities, students with deaf blindness, students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So it was 3 LID at first, and Mary Scott led that up. And then they dropped it because the group was growing that we were talking about. At that point, we started just saying it went to low incidence statewide network. TA asked us to do some things for students with traumatic brain injury. So we kind of covered that at one time. And another time we did a statewide stakeholders group and talked about Down syndrome. And we know that all of these students, what really says who they are is they have some needs that they require some really intensive supports. So it's really about the supports that they need. I kind of use the term interchangeably now between significant cognitive disabilities and complex access needs, but my belief is that students with complex access needs are students with significant cognitive disabilities. When they are given the appropriate supports that they need, the disability is less significant. That is kind of how the path has changed. The new grant we're under has allowed us to do a lot more, and we partnered with Region 13, and they are just the gurus of getting everything like the little video to look. I mean, they take the thoughts and put it into this wonderful vision that everybody can see. So I have been privileged to work with Jim Gonzalez and the team there. It's been amazing. We also have some great parent videos, because I think about, if we want to help students and get the word out so that we can kind of do this shift that takes place, we have to empower parents. As parents, a child is born with a disability. The medical community doesn't always give them like this wonderful future view. They tell them more about, you can expect this and that, and sometimes in a lot of negative terms. Then they come to the educational system and they really sometimes don't have those expectations. A lot of times parents, they're protective of their children. What they want more than anything, as we all do, is to know that their child is valued and cared for and safe. But I want to take that to the next level and say, yes, and we want to give them the most that we can, and we have to hold high expectations. So we have some great parent-to-parent videos where they really talk about helping parents have that outlook. The next videos that are going to be coming out soon are some administrator videos, because no matter how fired up the teacher is, she has to have an administrator on board. And a lot of times administrators haven't had a lot of experience in working with students with the types of needs that our students have. So we're hoping with our administrative series to give them some resources and tools, and then really just kind of motivate them to begin changes on their campus.
I want to add to what Lottie's saying about families. I was a special ed supervisor in my district when my daughter was identified with a disability. And I think I was looking for, sitting on both sides of the table, I was looking for more hope and more positive ARD meetings with my daughter, and then I didn't always receive that. So, I think it's important, the parent videos that Texas Can has developed really gives families an understanding and hope that working with your team will enhance your child's education, and the questions that you may want to ask, don't hold back. I think sometimes when we're at ARD meetings, families are hesitant to ask questions because they think they don't sound too intelligent. But really, those videos really say, for those families to ask those questions and get answers they want. Because I was always surprised at the lack of knowledge that families had about the IEP, ARD meetings, what to ask, what's my responsibility, what's my legal responsibility. So I think some of those videos that Lottie and Texas Can has produced are really going to enhance and change the lives of families. Those are really important. I think for families, it's really critical to understand the whole ARD process and their education of their child so they can help them at home, at school, in the community.
I agree with you, Patrick, that a lot of families don't understand. And I was just thinking about when Lottie was speaking was that, TEA did their first survey of parents back in 2003. And one of the things that came out was, most important was they wanted their kids to feel valued, respected and valued, kept
Yes.
coming out louder and louder. And also some of the complaints were that during the ARD process, the ARD meeting, they go too fast and don't have time to ask questions.
Right,
I don't understand what they're telling me, and just could we slow the process down? Could we, because I want to understand how I can help my child. And I think what you guys are doing is so important down that road of helping parents understand, the process, as well as, the role that they play in their child's education and things they could be doing. Because a lot of times they're, or they're depending on friends or other people who sometimes who've not had positive experiences. And so it becomes more litigious than what it needs to be. So looking forward to the videos.
And I changed my behavior too as a supervisor after my daughter was identified. So I saw both sides. I would tell a family, everything's going to be okay. But then when I was sitting on the other side of the table, maybe things are not going to be okay. So I changed my behavior based on my experience with my daughter being identified with a disability. So thank you. It's really important. The families feel comfortable. They can ask those questions. Just because you're, in a tie or a suit sitting at a table, I want families to be comfortable and really understand this whole process, because this process is a lifelong. I mean, as long as you're in education, it's going to be a lifelong process, and you're going to be adult learning. So great point. Thank you very much for saying that.
Yeah, and another thing is that, when we're looking at students and children with, complex needs, those needs are not just needs for school. It's not limited to school. I used to tell people, the kid is learning disabled, they're learning disabled, not just in school. They're not making your life miserable at school, just because they are, it's just that's a disability they have, and it goes with them to home. And that transition of skills from school to home is so vital, so that, parents know how, what we found with that survey and multiple surveys afterwards was, how can I help my child at home? That was the number one questions.
That is so important, that teamwork between the teacher and the parents, so that if whatever we're doing at school that's successful, we do it the same way at home and vice versa. And, there have been times when I know I've heard teachers say, oh, the parents say he does this at home, but we've never seen him do that. But, it is like, well, you have to look at everything that surrounds that, like how comfortable the child is in that environment, what kind of supports he is given, and then how you can duplicate it so that those same things are happening in both places. I really believe all things in life come down to relationship, no matter what we're talking about. And so the relationship between the teachers and the student, but even also the relationship between the teacher and the parents and the student's siblings and the grandparents. I mean, really working with the whole team that is that circle around the student, that circle of support, those people. The more that relationship is intact and really supported, the better things will be for that student. And it takes some time sometimes because like when I was junior high, so by the time my students came to me, the parents had some different experiences. So maybe their learning history with school was a little bit different and with different teachers, and they may have come without a lot of trust. And so it was building that relationship and helping, always setting expectations. This is what's going to happen in the class. This is what we're doing today. This is what happened today. This was a high point of the day. Journaling back and forth on it daily with parents. All of these kinds of things, I think we talk about too in our monthly instructional guides about, building that relationship, supporting parents, and letting them know exactly what's being done in the classroom and how it's being done, and celebrating small successes. I think it's good for everybody when you're looking at data. Regardless, like you have to take data, but it's those little increases that sometimes mean so much. So you've been working on something and that moment happens, and you just have to celebrate with as many people on the team as you can. Sometimes we've had small little successes, and sometimes we have had like, oh my gosh, who knew? I didn't see that coming. I miss that part of being in that classroom environment and that part of that team, but I'm excited about what I'm able to do now. And I just want to help other teachers, be empowered to work with parents and to support their students.
Lotta, you mentioned monthly instructional guides. Can you discuss those with us?
When I first came to the classroom, not knowing anything really, I had a hard time being a boss to paraprofessionals. I didn't know, especially since I was coming into the classroom I came into, I think there were 2 or 3 pairs in the classroom already who had been there, like they had been with this group of students a lot longer than any teacher had since I came to junior high. Because at that time we were having a lot of turnover with teachers. So trying to know how to step up and guide and lead my paraprofessional team was difficult for me. And so I started like trying to write myself notes about what I was supposed to be doing every month. And one of the first things that I did was I created a classroom manual, because I'm not a person that really feels comfortable with confrontation. So I put all our classroom rules for my paraprofessionals in a classroom manual. And that helped me like, oh, look, this is our class rule book. And so it's all written in there, and I spelled everything out, and we talked about, about different things with my expectations for how the students would be treated. Just everything was in there. And that was the beginning of the monthly instructional guides. And then they kind of built from there. As at that time, working in a self-contained classroom, there's just so many things that you have to coordinate. Coordinating those things and I was in the classroom when, the first alternate assessments came out. So in the beginning, we were doing locally developed alternate assessments, which really meant the teacher was creating something. And then we had tax alt. And as we moved through all of those, I learned a lot along the way. But I felt like as the alternate assessment became more standardized, we kind of focused on that assessment a lot. And it's like, hey, don't forget, we've got to be instructing all year before we assess our students. So how can we make all these pieces come together so that we're providing, effective assessment, everything's aligned with the general curriculum and with the IEP and just all the different pieces. So that was the thinking behind the monthly instructional guides, just trying to help teachers feel a little more comfortable with the process, because you start school and then it's like in the blink of an eye, it is winter break, and then, it's the end of school. So all those expectations, unless you have a plan, all those expectations at the very beginning, sometimes the best laid plans, as we say, the best laid plans don't always work out. So you just have to break it down into smaller goals, and then it's more manageable.
Yeah, I love the monthly guide, how it talks about, it almost starts the year out and gets them on, it's like giving them some a foundation or footing, if you will. Like, hey, this isn't everything you'll do, but look, when you start the year in August, you want to review the folders, right? You want to know, hey, in my school, do we have an established curriculum? Is this something that I need to address more or less? Is this, and so it's almost like an outline or a blueprint for success. So when I went through that month by month, I thought, wow, because I was a life skills teacher. I was a PPCD teacher. And I thought, where was this when I was teaching?
Right.
So I definitely love that.
It has come a long way, and a lot of our resources have, because now we're really focusing on our students being included in the general ed classroom. And that, I can't wait for you to see the administrator videos, because we really talk about it in depth. And next in September, we'll have an online inclusion coaching guide, and we'll have a series of courses about how students with significant cognitive disabilities can be part of the general ed classroom, because all the research supports inclusion, even inclusion of students with very severe disabilities. And there hasn't been, in the last 4 years, been any research that says it's better to segregate students with significant cognitive disabilities in a room down at the way into the hall or in a portable at the corner of the school property. We actually, with our materials that are going to be coming out, we had a pilot this year with, I have to give a shout out to Hawkins Elementary on El Paso, because they piloted our materials. The environment was not nice, but they got through all the COVID kinds of things that were going on in the pandemic, when El Paso was really a hot spot, and they just killed it. They were able to begin transitioning 2 students into the general ed classroom. And one of the things that they talked about is the change in their students' personalities when they were with their peers, just all the increase in their verbal output, all different kinds of positive things happen. And the kids in the class that they were transitioning into also had a lot of great things that came about. And that just kind of goes back to why I do what I do. And it's because I had some relationships with some diverse kids that had different needs than I did. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And so I love that we can teach that diversity is okay, and that we support each other in different ways. Everybody brings something to the table. Everybody brings something to the table. So I can't wait for this series to go live. TEA is reviewing our stuff right now, and my hope is that it will all be published in September.
Jump in, guys. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to something, if that's okay. Lottie, you've talked a lot about relationships. I completely agree with you. My background is as a diagnostician, and that was a very important thing for me in my ARDs, is I always wanted to have some kind of connection with my parents, because I knew that we were talking about very personal things. And then you also mentioned, Patrick, that you wanted more positive ARD meetings. And so I know a part of that is, you know, in the technical piece, making sure we use vocabulary that's understood. You know, we all understand that as professionals, but when we think about talking about schools, going into a school, maybe with a new principal who's going to be running ARDs, what are some things, you know, not only as working in a school district, but also as a parent of a child with special needs, would you say helps create that positive ARD meeting? You know, what concrete ideas could we give a principal to say, this is what a positive meeting feels like for me?
I think at the beginning, it's just, is to talk about the strengths of the child, the student. Just talk about strengths and what their unique gifts are and their abilities. Just start out with that. Sometimes the ARD meeting is a deficit-based model. You're talking about their needs, and we have to talk about their needs. I understand that, but try to be more positive in the sense of what are their unique abilities? What do they like to do? What are their preferences? What are their interests? What are their strengths? And then you get to the needs. I know that. I think that's important. I think what Lottie mentioned is this, especially for students with complex needs, is this teamwork, this effective teams, because most of our students have maybe a physical therapist, a speech and language person, occupational therapist. This team is so critical. I think El Paso is doing a great job of putting this team together, of saying, okay, this is the student we have. Let's work together to build some common goals, some common objectives. Not that the speech therapist does her thing or his thing, and then somebody else does kind of episodic, but really putting together an effective team by saying, okay, let's meet, let's talk about specific goals and objectives, long-term goals, objectives, maybe not just for this year, but for the next couple of years, so that we can be moving in a direction. And with the family's input, as we ask the family, what is your vision for your child? What are your dreams and hopes? And then including the student, as you, self-determination, the I am determined, some of their work is to bring everybody in and says, where do you want to go with this? It's kind of, I've done a lot of person-centered planning with families. So, what are your relationships? What's a circle of friendships? So begin to build that and use the ARD meeting as a kind of a vehicle to build those tools and those nuances to build that into the whole IEP process. I think that's going to give our students much more a dream and a hope for the future, because you're looking at not just this year, but the future. So that's why I think will be more. And El Paso's done a great job as I read the notes, and they're doing a great job with that.
I have to second what Patrick said. Cheryl Jorgensen has done a lot of work with us, and I mean, so inspiring. And we just, I want to be like a sponge around her, because the things she says and the research and that she shares. But one of the things that she talks about is that leading with student strengths. And she once said that, like, how would we want to be introduced? Like, do you want to introduce, this is Lottie, and she struggles with this and this and this, and in the past she has failed at whatever. But it's nobody wants to come into a meeting and be introduced in that way. And it does a lot to foster a relationship with parents when we use that kind of the strength-based, these are his interests, these are some things that he brings that are really important to our class. And anytime, what I have found, parents love to see their student with other students. It's life-changing when we can share how things are happening in a classroom with their gen ed peers. The other thing I think about an IEP is students should be involved in their ARD meeting. They should put together a presentation. They should be in that meeting and participate to the maximum extent possible. And know that this meeting is about them, and everybody at the table sees the student who we are making decisions, life-changing decisions for. I've often thought, when in a self-contained classroom, and especially when I came to the service center, after leaving a self-contained classroom, like, you never really know in a self-contained classroom if you're doing a good job, because you don't get an opportunity to see others doing what you do. And so then when I came to the service center and I went out and visited other schools, it's like, okay, who's doing the same kind of thing? But one of the things I noticed is a lot of times, we know that sometimes students with significant cognitive disability need a lot of repetition to learn a task. But I would see teachers asking students to do things with a lot of repetition without them ever explaining why learning this task is important, or sharing with them the data, like, look, yesterday you were able to do this many times or for this long, and maybe creating that visual graph to share with the student and connecting what they're learning to some real life outcome. We all need that. And it makes sense that we should also be doing it for students with significant cognitive disabilities, because most often our students with significant cognitive disabilities understand so much more than they're able really to express and show. So just by starting early on, their participation in the ARD, if we start from the very beginning, by the time they're in high school, it will look very different. And that's why I think that it's important as early as possible, having students be with their peers in those general ed settings, hearing that great content information from the general ed teachers and being supported in all of their needs by that special ed teacher. So that's where I would like to see things move to as we go forward. And I know administrators are in schools that are going to be, how is that even possible? But you know, you take a step and then you look at it and you revise and you add in supports or whatever. And that's kind of what our El Paso team did. They were remote when they decided they're going to start introducing the student to the rest of the gen ed class. And then that just it was so much more successful when they were able to meet their peers and be with their peers. And it even made a difference, like a parent reported to the principal, like, wow, what a difference. His whole outlook, his whole, you know, the way he behaves at home has changed so much. It's just a matter of like taking that initial step, beginning the journey, and we'll get better as we go. That's just part of it. We'll start and we'll get better as we go. But I know in all of my career, for so long, it seemed like we kept doing the same things. Like, okay, enough, we need to change this. And so I'm hoping that our resources will help people begin to make those changes.
Well, I just want to say that, you know, you're speaking so many of my different love languages here: strength focused, person centered. I mean, it's this idea, you know, as an LPC, as a counselor for years, you know, I was a solution focused person. I was, and even as a special ed director, you know, I realized that, you know, whether I was overseeing self-contained classrooms when I wish they were more inclusive and such, that the adults in these systems are doing what they think they're being asked to do, which is, hey, you know, find the weaknesses and try to make them better. And what I love hearing Patrick saying from TEA's perspective, I want our listeners to hear this. The Texas Education Agency is saying, look for the strengths. We don't have to have a deficit model of education. We can reverse order how we go about doing this thing. And that costs you absolutely nothing to change. It literally is easy as saying, hey, today, when you go into that classroom and you're making that little tally chart, instead of looking for all the things that kid does wrong throughout the day, start marking the things you see right. And then all of a sudden, a teacher says, wow, that kid's behavior has improved so much last week. And really, has that child's behavior improved, or or are you just looking for what you are going to find, which is what you've been asked to look for? And that is strengths versus weaknesses, positives versus negatives, right? And so I love, Patrick, that you shared that. And I just love that this network really is striking this kind of approach, because I feel like, you know, in design thinking, we talk a lot about designing to the edges. We want to develop a universal principle at the edges, at the margins, because you can never move a system from the center out, right? Or from the top down. You have to kind of go out to the edges, to the fringes, find those extreme users and figure out what would move the system in a better way for these end users, right? Our students with complex needs. Knowing that if we hit this on the mark, it's going to be good for all students, because this is the model that could change Texas education for every student to where all kids, that trajectory is going up, up, up when we find their strengths, when we help them understand their strengths, and we redefine this thing we call education in Texas. So I'm super excited here. I know you can hear it in my voice. I don't mean to go down these rabbit paths, but I'll tell you, that's exciting. I have a question though. I know we talked about the resources and like the month by month kind of guidebook. And then we talked about some videos. And then I see on the Texas Complex Access Network website, courses. Can you talk a little bit about the courses and what exactly that is?
Well, Patrick, you want me to take this one, or are you in the?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead, Lottie.
We have two courses, and I know Patrick says this all the time, that we really feel every teacher working with students with complex access needs should take. And the first one is building a foundation for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And the second one is our IEP rigor course. So really the guidance, both of them have rubrics with them. They are meant to help teachers continuously get better. And so we did a cohort with each one where teachers moved through, and then they were coached by ESC specialists. And then we came back and we used the rubric again to see where they might have improved it at, and really happy with those courses. The Building a Foundation course talks about 5 quality indicators. So I hope I can remember them all. The first one is alignment with the standards, effective teams, communication, differentiation, and I left out one.
Classroom climate.
Classroom climate. So really all of everything that we do kind of aligns underneath one of those indicators. And so we break it down in the Building a Foundation course. And we first start with the evidence of why it's important. And then we give examples of what it looks like. And so we have all sorts of examples in there. And then they do the rubric on themselves and see where does their practice fall along the lines of best practice. And it moves all the way through on each one. Administrators don't always know how to support their teachers of students with significant cognitive disability. They don't know what to look for in the classes when they do those walkthroughs. So we put together that tool. And the IEP quality and rigor training, everything that we outline in the rubric could be applied to any student with an IEP, but it's just different in the complexity and what would be required, the supports that should be added in, and helping teachers to not be afraid to make instruction a little more rigorous. Like sometimes when I was back in the classroom, no one gave me that guidance. We had a program for IEPs where you kind of scrolled and clicked. And I thought, I know we can get this done. I know we can get this done. It wasn't as thoughtful and data-based decisions as we know are needed now. And so helping teachers think about being a little bit more rigorous in their expectations and setting those goals. And also what a good PLAF looks like. It should be pretty extensive for a student with significant cognitive disabilities. So in the IEP course, there's a wonderful PLAF, and then there's a not so great PLAF. And then that course moves them through. They really need their own an IEP they have created in front of them. So as they move through, they look at their IEP and see if they have evidence of each different component within their IEP. Those are, I think, our two heavy hitters, I'd say. We have some other courses that are also amazing. Let's see, we have the Building an Authentic Academic Response. And that course came about because with the STAR Alt 2, there's an exemption for no authentic academic response. But one of the things that I noticed was that students were excluded from that assessment because there was no authentic academic response. And that was just carried over year after year after year. And the truth is that, that's our job, to build an authentic academic response. We can't just say, nope, doesn't have one. And so that course is about how you build an authentic academic response, the kinds of things that you need to be aware of. And I love that course. And I could talk all day just about that course, but it is a very important course. We have the 3 C's of behavior management, which is connection, communication, and choices. So for our population, when you have those, you'll see behavior go down. So if you have a connection with the student, if the student has a way to communicate and the student has a way to make choices, and you provide a lot of choices to empower the student, you will see much better behavior than a student that doesn't have that. So I like that course as well. We have teaching literacy to students with significant cognitive disability. This is a facilitated course. So as teachers move through, they get feedback. They have to do some uploads. They have to do some applications throughout that course. And that was a course that we've kind of updated. Originally, it was made when we had the LID network, and Dr. Karen Erickson helped us with the material for that. We also have STAR 2 before, during, and after, and that was just because, like I said earlier, that emphasis was on the test. It's like, okay, but what are you doing before the test? And then what are you doing during the test? And then how are you using those test results to make some changes in the way you're instructing? And so that course will be updated some this year, and I'm excited about working with TA on that one. We also have, and this was originally built, the Down syndrome course, the evidence-based practices for the education of students with Down syndrome. They're just great practices. I will be honest with you. The things that we talk about are good for any students, whether they have an IEP or not. They're just some great supports. We started that, we did a statewide stakeholder meeting with parents of children with Down syndrome and talked about what they'd like to see and what they wanted. And that was back in the LID network. And then we've kind of improved on the courses we've gone through. We have some exceptional videos within this course that I just wish everybody could watch them. They may at some time also live on our webpage, because it's like, oh, they're buried in the course. I want everybody to see them. The other one right now we have is Beyond Time and Money, Teaching Mathematics. It's a good course. And I have to say, all of our courses, we try to link to the other networks, because the Autism Network also has a math course that I really love. So I'm kind of torn between the two. I think that's all that we have currently. And then we're coming out with the fundamentals of inclusive education, presuming competence, transitioning a student from self-contained to the general education classroom, supports for participation, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, creating and sustaining peer networks, coaching and team meeting basics, that's for helping the team get started, and accessible instructional materials. Cheryl Jorgensen worked with us in creating the content for all of those, and they're going to be amazing. I can't wait until they are up. Each one has a fidelity checklist and a guide for implementation. So when we coached our pilot team, Cheryl Jorgensen partnered with us on that. And as we went through, we started by doing the course and the fidelity checklist as a baseline measurement for the team. And then they looked to the guide to implementation and they picked action items. And we kind of moved forward that way. And then at the end of the project, we came back and did those fidelity checklist again to see where our, how much they had grown. And it was nice to see the changes that we saw. And we got some great, we interviewed the team, we got some great video snippets. And we also got some great coaching things from Cheryl that are, some of them are interspersed in courses, and some are in will be on our online coaching guide, and we'll have a series that we'll build on, or we're hoping to build on through the years, called, and I hope I can say this because my mouth is feeling kind of dry, but it's excerpts from the experts.
Ah.
That series. So as we move forward, having different researchers and things share things with us.
Looking at the website, I mean, it looks like, I mean, I know the focus of our statewide technical assistance networks are, resources, vetted courses, professional development, professional learning, things like that for our Texas educators, right? Not just our special ed teachers, but our general ed teachers, and even like you had mentioned, our administrators, our principals, that we want to make sure we all have this baseline understanding of this information, so that when we come together, like Patrick said, as a team, we all know, hey, this is my role, this is your role, but we work in this big comprehensive process. And so I love that you have kind of the parent videos there. So you have information there for parents as well, and maybe teachers and educators, if they have more access or they think to go to these resources more, they share those with parents. But the way I look at the courses that you've built out, I don't know if I'm more excited about the courses that are currently available or the ones that are in the can, right, that are ready to kind of drop. And so I feel like you're hitting on some major themes and topics. The idea of inclusion, it's so easy to gloss over that and think, well, we've been doing inclusion for how long? Well, you can't do inclusion, right? Inclusion is mindset. It's a process. It's what a child experiences when they enter a building, and so I love that we're circling back to the fundamentals. Like, we're not making assumptions here that everyone just knows what inclusion is. And then that the idea of fostering peer relationships and just some great resources here. So I don't know where I was going with that, Pam. Stop me, please. I just keep going. Patrick, jump in.
Good points, John. But I think one thing we want to look at too is that we're not looking at just social inclusion in terms of proximity for a student being in a general education classroom. But what we're finding from research, and as I read more research, as a student is in the general education classroom and they're learning adaptive books, learning a math skill from a teacher, a co-teaching in the classroom, from their peers, what they're learning is skills that it seems like from what the early research says, that those skills that they're learning in those classrooms facilitate higher level expectations and capacity as they move on to other skills. So it's not just that, yeah, that's great. If the administrator opens the door, you see a student with complex needs in that classroom, that student is really learning in that classroom. So those skills that they're learning in that 6th grade math class for that period of 45 minutes to an hour is going to facilitate higher capacity in that student as they learn other skills for the next years that they're in school. So it's not just, it looks good and it feels good, John. It's going to make a difference. And that's what the research is telling us, is if we segregate students, their capacity is going to be limited. And that's it, that whole presumed competence. But if we develop and create more inclusive classrooms for our students with complex needs, they're going to learn more and we're going to have better outcomes as we move on. They're going to learn more skills. They're going to have higher capacity, just like we want for all students in education. So we're going to have better outcomes with the STAR All-2 or IEP, measuring IEP, monitoring progress. We're going to see better outcomes. That's why inclusion is so important, not just the social aspect of it.
Patrick, when we first started talking about inclusion, we would hear people say, I do inclusion. My students eat lunch with their peers, or they go to some extracurricular activity. Right. Not extracurricular, but like art, or one of the electives. Yeah. But it's not, what we're talking about is authentic inclusion. So the students are in the classroom, they are with their peers. I love seeing students side by side with peers and not with a paraprofessional right beside them, but having some natural peer supports built in. And they're working a lesson that is the same. It may be reduced in depth, breadth, or complexity, but it's related to what everybody else is learning. And so the team has met in advance and they've talked about what the lesson is going to be. And we've looked for connections to that, that lesson for our student. We've looked at the kind of supports they'll need to be able to respond to questions or participate in groups and built those things in. And when we're able to do that, it is a beautiful thing. So like I said, it is a lot of work, but we have to start by really having these important conversations.
Yeah, I agree with you. We used to say, if you want to teach a kid to read, you cannot put him in a room with bad readers. If you never hear good reading, you never know.
Right.
It's the same thing. If you want students to learn, you got to put them where there's rigorous and complex learning occurring. And that's going to be in your gen ed classroom. And truly, they will learn. They will pick up. We started, I'm just going to date myself, we just started long ago with inclusion, and we moved some students that were just resource students that I kept thinking, I think these kids can do better in a gen ed setting. And everyone was like, I'm not sure, Pam. I was like, well, we got nothing to lose. It's kind of like, we know what we have here, but we have nothing to lose. And and the biggest concern was math. It was algebra. We were starting algebra on junior high campus, and they thrived. Now, these are students who couldn't divide, but they didn't need to know how to divide because everything they were using were calculators or manipulatives. They were able to use both manipulatives and calculators to do the work that their gen ed peers were doing. And they were more successful than any of us thought. But, it was just that belief in, let's give them a chance. Let's see what they can do, because this is not the right environment for them. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that we need to give kids a chance, give them the opportunity to prove us wrong, really. Prove the adults wrong.
Dangerous assumption, right? We need
Sure.
human intelligence. We need to look at every kid as being filled with potential. And then from there, let's see what they show us. I strongly believe, education should be the mechanism by which adults help kids realize their potentials. It's how do we get out of the way enough and facilitate and coach, and whatever the word of the month is, enough to ensure they have we've created the conditions that alongside their peers, with the curriculum, with the blessing of technology, that kids are able to somehow work out life hacks, right? And get around these struggles, not struggle less, maybe struggle 5 times more, but have the perseverance and the skill set to do it because they're interested in their content. They have peers sitting beside them that are encouraging them. And then at the end of the day, one thing Pam is so passionate about is, right, that employability, that what is life after school, that we're not graduating kids to the couch, that these kids that have come into a system alongside their peers, exit a system alongside their peers, and then go to work in a system alongside their peers. To me, it makes perfect sense. I know logistics are always difficult. Change is always messy, but man, in Texas Can, I think, is changing, right, the direction, the script, how we're going about working with our kids with complex needs. And I just am so thankful y'all came on with us today. I know we had a hard time getting the schedule all lined up, but this is going to be fabulous. I can't wait to get it out so our listeners, I think we need to get people to the website. We need to get people to the resources. Pam?
Yes, John, I agree with you. I'd like to thank Lottie and Patrick for coming on with us as well. It was worth it. The wait was, it was definitely worth the wait. And we're glad you were able to be with us and share all the resources. And Lottie, you want to give a shout out to your website for us?
Yes, it is txcan.ta.texas.gov. There is one other resource we didn't talk about, but if your listeners would like to look at it, it is our research summary, and where we have current research articles, and we kind of give a little overview of their articles, and then there's a call to action for each one for Texas educators. So we have some great things on there, and it's something that we will continue to update as more and more research comes to us. Absolutely.
Well, on behalf of SPEDTalk and all of the ESCs that collaborate in the Liaison Project, we are just so blessed and thankful to have y'all on. It's exciting to see this kind of just quality information and resources coming out of our technical assistance networks, and Texas Can has definitely set a high standard.
John, tell everyone how they can continue to elevate the conversation about special education in Texas.
You got it, Pam. They can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at SPEDTalk 2020. Because in these disconnected times, connecting with others has never been so important. Now more than ever, it takes courage to create culture and kindness to keep us connected. If you enjoyed this episode of Sped Talk, be sure to share it with a friend because information should always flow through us, not to us. We couldn't do this without you, our listeners, and we need your help sharing the amazing transformation occurring in special education. Together, we can change the trajectory of learning opportunities in Texas for students with disabilities. If you have ideas, information, or resources that you think we should share on an upcoming episode of Sped Talk, let us know at SPEDTalk 2020 on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And be sure to like our page while you're there. Oh yeah, and if you get a chance, please consider giving us a positive review on the podcast platform that you listen to Sped Talk.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.